Welcome to week 10 of the organizational behavior session of the fall 2014 quarter. I'm your online instructor, Diana Block, and this week you're going to submit your organizational analysis paper. So in this paper, you are going to analyze the behaviors that are present in an organization that you're familiar with, and you're going to present those behaviors and explain how they relate to and link to specific concepts that we have learned in the class. So the course paper instructions indicate that you should use a direct links to specific concepts. So I'm going to go through quickly a lot of the concepts that we've covered in this class so that you give you an idea of some of the things you should see in your paper. Now, depending on what organization you're writing about, every concept won't apply to every firm. So whichever concepts you do choose to include that you feel apply to the firm you're writing about, make sure you're using specific concepts. And here's what I mean by that. So the first couple of chapters, or the first chapter, talked about systems theory and organizational design. So if this is part of your paper, you should be talking about whether or not the organization is an open or closed system, whether they have permeable or impermeable boundaries, if there's re-engineering, if it's a networked organization. You might even discuss whether the work there is primary or secondary, what type of career plans or paths are available in that firm. So these are some of the concepts that you might include if you are including a section about systems theory and organizational design in your paper. Now, a lot of people will probably want to discuss personality of certain people within the firm and how those behaviors tie to the course. So if you're going to discuss personality, the type of things you'll be discussing is their locus of control. Maybe you'll use their Big Five profile or the Myers-Briggs indicator, or discuss maybe practical intelligence or other concepts. And keep in mind, there's lots more concepts in these chapters. I'm just giving you some examples of what I mean by specifics. You shouldn't just say he has a bad personality. That doesn't tell me that you've taken the course, doesn't tell me that you know anything about organizational behavior. I want you to hear some specifics that you're going to describe, specific concepts and terminology that are explained by behavior taking place in the organization. So if you were to talk about how the decision making is handled in the firm, I wouldn't want you to just tell me they make good decisions or they make bad decisions. That is not helpful in the scope of what this paper is supposed to do. So when students write things like they have bad decision making, that results in a low score on the paper because it doesn't provide any specifics. I'm wanting specifics such as, are we using convergent or divergent thinking, programmed or non-programmed? What's the decision style inventory of this firm? Do they use formal reasoning, image theory, things like that, specifics? And again, it doesn't have to be these, but it does have to be something specific from the course. When we talk about motivation, which is another topic that a lot of people like to use, and unfortunately, sometimes students say things like, they're not motivated or they provide great motivation. That's, again, I'm hoping this is coming across clearly that that's not going to result in as high a score as you're probably looking for. If you're going to discuss motivation, you need to discuss specific concepts and theory within motivation, such as exactly what are the intrinsic or extrinsic motivators? How does the organization apply McClellan's needs theory? What are some of the explicit motives? Does the firm use distributive justice? Things like that. And then when you're talking about job design, if you choose to, you might apply the Hackman's model of job design, which each of those characteristics and how it relates to outcomes. You might discuss the EVLN model or flex time commuting if those are applicable to that firm. You might discuss whether that firm has meritocracy or performance appraisal. So if you're going to include information about job design, you want to include some specifics like that. Stress is another area where people tend to be way too general in their paper. If you want to talk about stress, you need to provide some specific concepts that you've learned about stress and how it applies to that firm. So, as the stress due to role conflict, role ambiguity, to cognitive demands, overload. How does this relate to type A or type B personality patterns related to stress? So there's a lot in that stress chapter that are specifics that you can use to apply to your firm. Communication, again, I'm bringing this up because this is what I've seen a lot in teaching this class, is that people say, a lot of the same things, like the communication is really good there, or they have really poor communication, or there's a communication breakdown. While that's a good introductory sentence, that doesn't really tell me any specifics. Tell me exactly about their communication process. What are they using? Do they have self-serving bias? Is that the reason the communication is poor? Is it information filtering, fundamental attribution errors? Okay, not sure what happened there. Somebody came into the room with some music or something. So you see the specific types of concepts that we're looking for that apply to communication. Another topic you might use might be cross-cultural relationships. We talked about that in one of the chapters. So if you're going to present that as an issue in your organization, you need to be specific. Are we talking about high, low context cultures, monochronic, polychronic cultures, psychological contract differences, cultural intelligence? What are the specific cross-cultural issues within that firm? Some specific items we talked about in, or you read about under the title of groups in that chapter. We may have talked about role strain within the group, the Kohler effect, social compensation, various types of teams, specifics as far as what kind of team you're encountering in this organization that you're writing about. Okay, leadership. A lot of you are going to discuss leadership within your firms. And so, again, the fact that they're a good leader or a bad leader or a great leader doesn't help your paper. What you want to talk about is specific leadership types. Are they a formal leader, emergent leader? What makes them a transactional versus a transformational leader? What's the leadership prototype there? Again, cultural intelligence could apply there as well. But you need to have some specific concepts related to leadership that are theories and terminology out of the textbook. And the same with power. A lot of people will write about power in their organization, and the fact that someone has power or misuses power is too general. You'll need to talk about whether it's formal or informal power, the specific type of power, whether that's referent power or information power or coercive. What is their political behavior? Are there coalitions? How is power specifically being applied in that organization? I'm going to provide a couple more examples. Conflict. Most organizations are going to have some type of conflict. That's commonplace. And so the fact that there is conflict isn't really an analysis. Look at what are the specific details of the conflict. What type of conflict is it? Is it relationship conflict, task conflict, process conflict? All of that was reviewed in the chapter on conflicts. Is this conflict constructive or destructive? And then why do you think that? Um, is it a manifest conflict or is it a latent conflict? And then what can be done about the conflict? Our book discusses behavioral interventions and structural interventions. So you want to use specific terminology, concepts, and theories from the book to talk about conflict if conflict is going to be a part of your paper. And then at the structure, you might talk about whether it's a steep or flat hierarchy, if it's a dynamic, a complex environment, how contingency theories applied, what's their collective paradigm. So as you can see throughout this PowerPoint, I'm given specific concepts, specific terminology, theories from the book. And your charge is to apply these specific concepts to specific behaviors that are taking place within the organization. So, like I said, I've taught this class a lot, and there's a general mistakes that a lot of students make, and I want to help you guys avoid those. One of them, the major one, is that people use the paper to talk about whether or not they like the company or not. Whether they hated the company, they hated working there, they hate everything about it, or they loved the company, they loved working there, they love everything about it, they're friendly, they're great, I love the people. And they spend their whole paper talking about how either they love the place or they hate the place. And they fail to provide specific concepts about organizational behavior, which is the actual purpose of the paper. So I want to give you a heads up to be aware of that if you're going down that road of talking in generalizations about whether you like or dislike the firm, that get off of that road and redirect onto organizational behavior concepts. The another thing that people do mistakenly is they talk in very general terms, like they have a lot of conflict there. They don't tell me what kind, they don't tell me what specifically is done about it, whether it's constructive or destructive. They just talk about a concept in general. Motivation. Yeah, they're very motivated there. They'll put a sentence like that in there and not tell me any details about the motivation, how McClellan's needs theory is applied, the type of motivators that are present, the management theory X or theory Y. They don't tell me any of that. And so they just say motivation. So avoid doing that. If you're going to address a concept, address it in specifics and providing specific terminology, specific concepts, and theories. That's how you're going to get a perfect score on this paper. So, hopefully, this has given you some ideas of what to avoid and how to excel on this paper, exactly what I'm looking for. And if you have any questions, go ahead and give me a call or send me an email and I'll respond promptly. I look forward to talking with you in the discussion area this week. Thanks.